World of Warcraft has seen some very dark times. Content droughts, design fiascos, scandals, systems too complex for their own good, and radio silence as community engagement hits an all-time low. And now Final Fantasy XIV and other competitors are closing in. But I don't think this has to be the end of the story for World of Warcraft. What World of Warcraft needs is simpler systems, more content, better community engagement so that the dev teams know what will get players excited to pick up World of Warcraft again. To that end, I have invented a system of my own, a simple system that gives players huge amounts of customization, that lets developers add awesome and useful abilities without fear of spellbar bloat, giving players the ability to upgrade 3 of their spells to be something new. I'm cooking up concepts for 7 of these upgrade spells for every spec. Some of them are returning favorites, some of them are brand new. Either way, Blizzard has my express permission to use every concept I post about in these videos in the comments or on the forums. And if the Blizzard developers are too pressed for time to engage with the community, then I will. I'll get the feedback on this concept, and even if they don't take a single one of my ideas, they'll know what the players want, and most importantly, why. And they can use that to make the game better, because I want this game better. I want WoW to last another decade. You know, I was around when Outlaw was still called Combat, and to the best of my knowledge, it's the very first and only spec that ever got renamed, unless you count Retribution. I vaguely remember hearing that Retribution at some point in World of Warcraft's beta in 2003, it's really been that long? No, back then, it was called Combat. That's really going to make you think right there. And to think I wrote that paragraph just because I think every one of these videos needs some kind of intro, and I can't just dive into each set of upgrades with no ado. It's like I have this concept in my mind that I need some quantity of ado at the start of each of these videos. Or maybe I'm just putting off the moment where I admit that I really struggled with coming up with 7 upgrades for a given spec for, well, a variety of reasons. To be honest, there were some big mistakes that I made with my first iteration of the Outlaw specs upgrade spread. In fact, it might be the worst one in iteration 1. Of course, it's possible a different one is worse for some reason that I didn't notice, which is a scary thought. But I will still go in depth about why I did what I did in the first iteration, because the more I discuss about my mistakes and how they happened and the thought process that went into them, the sooner and the better you can set me on the right lines of thinking, and the better iteration 2 is going to be. So, that seemed like enough ado right there. In we go to the upgrade spread of iteration 1 that I think is my worst one yet. Number 1, Sidesplitter, an upgrade for Blade Flurry. It has no cooldown, slashes nearby enemies, and your next melee attack deals damage to up to 5 additional targets for 60% damage. The Dancing Steel talent causes this to affect your next 2 melee attacks. Casting Sidesplitter generates 1 combo point. Next we have Buckshot Blast, an upgrade for Between the Eyes that deals slightly less damage and deals it in a cone to multiple enemies, also having a shorter cooldown. Number 3, Flechette Round, an upgrade for Pistol Shot that adds a short but potent bleed effect. On the whole, it does more damage than Pistol Shot. Number 4, Ambuscade, an upgrade for Ambush that requires stealth, deals multi-target damage, and generates combo points depending on the target's hit with a minimum of 2 combo points. Fifth, we have Marathon, an upgrade for Sprint that lasts longer and has a shorter cooldown, but you don't move as fast as you would with Sprint. The next upgrade is Dust Bomb, an upgrade for Vanish that grants stealth to up to 2 nearby allies for up to 10 seconds. It has a shorter cooldown than Vanish. Also, you get stealth when you use this, just wanted to make sure that is understood. The final upgrade is Tether, an upgrade for Grappling Hook that brings the enemy to you instead of bringing you to the enemy, and has a much shorter cooldown. And now the part where I get to tell you what the heck I was thinking with these. First off, I'd wanted to pull Deadly Throw or the Warcraft 3 version of Shadow Strike into a lot of rogue kits, but I could not do that for Outlaw. You can tell that I ran out of ideas pretty quickly. Dust Bomb and Marathon did make it in from the other specs. Yeah, wonderful. Actually, in retrospect, I totally could have taken in Deadly Throw. I thought that I couldn't because Between the Eyes is already a ranged finisher, so Deadly Throw would be redundant. But now I'm realizing that what makes Between the Eyes so different is how much more damage it deals and the fact that it's got a cooldown. Dispatch is a filler finisher that's meant to be used between the Eyes casts. So I'm toying with the idea of drawing Deadly Throw into Iteration 2. Of course that, and a lot of other things, depends on the feedback I get. I copied in Ambuscade from the subtlety spread of upgrades, partly because I was low on ideas, and partly because Ambush is a legitimate part of Outlaw's rotation, according to Icy Veins, and partly because I figured that Outlaw relies entirely on Blade Flurry to do multi-target damage, and I wanted to break out of that a bit. That may well have been a misguided goal. It also explains what I did with the Sidesplitter upgrade. You see, I didn't realize that there was this thing called Restless Blades, where if you use combo point spenders, you reduce the cooldown of your Blade Flurry ability, and if you do it right, you have nearly 100% uptime on Blade Flurry. And I had no idea, for the longest time while I was putting this first iteration together, that Restless Blades was a thing. I actually thought that your window of multi-target damage was narrow and nowhere near 100% uptime. Try as I might to do my research, there are always things that I'm going to miss. So, once I realized that, why didn't I throw out the whole thing and start over? Well, it's because I wanted to know if there was anything salvageable in the Sidesplitter concept. I mean, Blade Flurry is a unique way of doing multi-target damage, and it's also at the moment your only way of doing multi-target damage. I figure that means giving players the option of doing multi-target damage in other ways has some potential. Even if I'm exactly right about that, it doesn't mean I did the right thing with Iteration 1's version of Sidesplitter. Feedback would be appreciated on the whole concept. I am ready to discard it if feedback says that I should. I'm ready to modify it or replace it if feedback says I should. There are no sacred cows here. I will still read you the paragraph that I wrote before I was aware of Restless Blades, so that you'll see what my thought process was. Sidesplitter is even more of a breakout. It was meant to provide a great deal more flexibility in multi-target damage. Instead of being a multi-target cooldown, it's a multi-target strike that makes your next melee attack deal damage to multiple targets. For a little while, I'd thought the Dancing Steel talent meant that I couldn't do this. Then I decided to just tweak Sidesplitter when the talent was selected and call it good. It definitely changes the value of Dancing Steel. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. As always, I'm open to feedback, up to and including replacing this or any other upgrade. This isn't the first Sustain Over Burst upgrade I've done, and it likely won't be the last. Though at the time I cooked this up, I didn't realize it's possible to achieve near constant Blade Flurry uptime thanks to the Restless Blades passive. So I'm more than willing to throw this out in the next iteration if I'm told it's a bad or useless idea, or that it couldn't be modified to the point where it's actually useful. Once I realized you could get near 100% uptime on Blade Flurry, I simply increased the amount of damage that gets made multi-target. Good grief, I'm editing this. I say I wrote that paragraph before I was aware of Restless Blades, and it turns out I was unaware of Restless Blades for only part of that paragraph. You can tell, my goal in editing this script is not to make myself look like I am smart. Admitting my ignorance and asking for help is a thing that I do a lot in these videos, but I haven't quite done those things this way before. Oh well. It has its positive aspects to find new and creative ways to admit my ignorance and ask for help. Or to find new, lazy ways to admit my ignorance and ask for help. Laziness is one step away from creativity sometimes. While it's on my mind, I could also use feedback about my strategy of shamelessly virtue signaling about humility in the most hilariously cringe ways possible. Does it have any chance of actually rubbing some humility off onto Blizzard? I mean, yeah, that was a joke, but it's funny because it's true. Whether Blizzard likes it or not, whether the developers like it or not, there are no two ways about it. Blizzard is going to need to pick up a lot of genuine humility if they want to turn World of Warcraft around. They need to get that message somehow. Until and unless I'm told otherwise, I'll proceed under the assumption that my strategy is at least worth a try. With that out of the way, back to the upgrade spread. Flechette round. It's just a small flavor change for pistol shot. If there are better ways to modify Flechette round than this, please do let me know. I'm prepared to make a lot of changes in Iteration 2 based on feedback, in case you hadn't noticed. Buckshot Blast is a similar flavor change, though again, its multi-target capabilities were, like Ambuscade, intended to break out of the Blade Flurry reliance. To be honest, I really like the idea of upgrading between the eyes. I can tell the Outlaw spec has a lot riding on between the eyes, since it's the most powerful finisher and it's on a cooldown. Though, if I haven't upgraded it the right way, please do let me know. Some part of me thinks that players are looking at the shorter cooldown aspect and thinking about the fact that a shorter cooldown will be a single target DPS buff even if the ability deals less damage. Again, I'm counting on feedback to set me straight and clear up my misconceptions. Tether was just plain me running out of ideas. I suppose I could have upgraded Sinister Strike, but nothing was coming to me until I started typing this script. And then it dawned on me that Saber Slash was the Legion version of Sinister Strike, at least for Outlaw. And I don't know how I could make it different from Sinister Strike. If I get feedback telling me to get Saber Slash in on this list, I will do it, especially if they tell me how I can make it different. One thought that occurs to me is maybe make it a kind of a 1-2 slash where you move your sword back and forth and hit the same target once with the front edge, once with the back edge, generating 2 combo points. Or does that alter the whole rotation too much? For a while I was thinking make it multi-target, but there's no point to that with Blade Flurry and Sidesplitter in the mix. If I start grasping at straws, I suppose I could give Kick an upgrade to let it silence a target when you successfully interrupt. I'm surprised that didn't occur to me, seeing as how I gave that kind of thing to literally every class I've done so far. I've done Paladin, Mage, Warrior, Death Knight, and Rogue as of the time I'm writing this. Oh well. I plan to iterate, so I shall, and I may yet add that. Not sure what I'd call it, though. The name Roundhouse was taken by Warriors, so if that frees up, you know what's going to happen. Now, when I started out with these upgrade concepts, I went ability by ability, not purpose by purpose, if you see what I mean. I asked myself, which abilities exist in this specs kit that I can give an upgrade to? And when I created upgrades based on which abilities I could upgrade, I often aimed for something that I thought looked or sounded cool. Almost always I wanted the upgraded ability to feel at least a little bit different from the original. Often I tried to create some kind of trade-off, making the upgrade situationally useful based on things like the number of targets affected or having a stronger effect with a longer cooldown, things like that. Rarely did I upgrade the same ability more than once for the same spec, but while I was putting together each spread of upgrades, what I didn't do, and what I probably should have done in retrospect, was to figure out what goals a player would have while they're looking at a list of upgrades, and then make sure upgrades exist in the spread that allow the player to pick upgrades that help them achieve those goals. In my next iteration, I plan to have that design goal in mind, to consider what the player wants to accomplish and how they could accomplish it with the upgrades. I strongly suspect that in this next iteration, there will be a lot more cases where I upgrade the same ability in 2 or more different ways. That will give players more options, and since that's going to be the goal with goal-oriented design, who knows? I might even have 3 different upgrades for the same ability in the end. However, I can do this much more effectively in an environment that has a great deal of feedback available, and that's where you come in. You have knowledge that comes from experience with these specs. I don't. I tried to do my research on Wowhead and Icy Veins for each spec, but inevitably there'll be things you know that I don't because you have experience that I don't have. You'll have more and better ideas than I could hope to have, and I know I need those, so please, let me know what you think of these upgrades and what better ideas you have for what to put in their places. And it's only after looking back on a bunch of these upgrades with the mindset of purposes that I realize one of the big mistakes I've made while assembling them is that while I was putting these upgrades together, I went ability by ability. It would have been wiser to go kit by kit or purpose by purpose. Like, I should put myself in the player's shoes and imagine what I would do if I wanted to use this to improve my single target sustained DPS, for example. As is, there are only two abilities that do that, Flechette Round and Dust Bomb, and Dust Bomb only improves it by adding more frequent ambushes. Yeah, not all that interesting. Upgrading Dispatch with an imported Deadly Throw upgrade is a better idea, but I could use player feedback on which other upgrade to boot out and replace with this, or whether there's something even better I could have put in its place. On the plus side, if I can assume that Buckshot Blast, Ambuscade, and Sidesplitter are good upgrades, which is a shaky assumption, but if I assume it, then I have 3 upgrades that buff multi-target DPS. So there's that, with a spec that has nearly 100% uptime on Blade Flurry when played correctly. Anyhow, boy, I hope Outlaw Iteration 2 is better. Now, it can hardly get any worse. No, not gonna say it. Saying things can't get worse is a well-known way of jinxing it, and that is the last thing I need. Plan B. Ask for feedback again like I do dozens of times per video. Please help me make Iteration 2 better than Iteration 1. Actually, this is just an observation, but it seems like I copied a lot more abilities from spec to spec with rogues than I did with other classes. Maybe that's a sign of a lack of creativity on my part, or maybe rogues simply share enough between their specs to the point where it makes sense. After looking through how different the specs are and how they play and what abilities they've got in their kits, I can say that second one, simply sharing enough between their specs to the point where it makes sense, is not the case. That leaves a lack of creativity on my part. Not my finest moment. I definitely do better with some of these upgrade spreads than others. In the ones where I recognize I've made some glaring mistakes, I tend to say, I done goofed. But I think I done goofed doesn't quite do this one justice. If you've watched this video and seen me make jokes at my own expense and assume I'm a moron based on the mistakes, then I urge you, take a look at some of my other videos for Project Decade for other specs and then decide how smart I am. Some of you will randomly see other ones where I done goofed, because there are other ones where I done goofed, and some of you will randomly see upgrade spreads that aren't too bad for my first iteration. I hope, oh so much, that the latter will tell the former which videos to watch. I know this iteration wasn't good, but I fully intend to make a better one based on feedback, so please give me feedback so that I can unfail the next time. I went into Project Decade knowing I'd make mistakes, probably make a fool of myself multiple times before finally getting it right. So why am I doing this? Why am I making a complete knucklehead of myself on the internet? I'm doing this, well, because Blizzard won't collect and compile this kind of feedback. And I think someone should. With the chaos that's happening at Blizzard, there's always a chance they'll need something like this in order to actually know what to do with their game to salvage their situation. It's a chance I'm taking. And even if they don't need it, even if they have a terrific player power system that's actually better than my semi-borrowed power concept, at the very least, me doing Project Decade will let them know that there are players who are willing to give them a chance, willing to lose sleep and set their free time on fire, and in general go to huge lengths to help them make the game the best it can be. And it'll give them a good idea what actually gets players excited to come back to World of Warcraft. So, please folks, keep the feedback coming. Help me unfail. Of course, I know Blizzard probably won't take many, or even any of these suggestions. Heck, they might even have something objectively better in store for us than the semi-borrowed power upgrade system that I've cooked up here. But knowing what gets players excited will be helpful to them even so. That is why I'm sacrificing so much of my free time and energy on Project Decade. And who knows, they might just need these ideas to get WoW going in the right direction. Heck, if this video series just gets the Blizzard developers into the habit of creating a blue post with the thinking in it that goes in depth enough for us to understand what they're doing and what their design goals are, then that would be a huge step forward. Even saying the thinking out loud is sometimes enough to get you a new perspective on what you're doing. Is it really what people want? Does it serve the purposes that it really should be serving in the end? Am I really doing something just to make a system look awesome instead of making the game overall better? What does it do for the fun factor? Am I making the mistake of prioritizing my design goals over the fun factor? Are my design goals the right design goals to have? Do my ideas match the spec's feel and flavor? Is it a net gain? Is it genuinely awesome? Things like that. Plus, we just plain need more communication from Blizzard. If Project Decade gets the development team into the habit of telling us the thinking for every change they make, then the whole project will have been worth it, even if they don't take a single suggestion. Again, if you see something you don't like bad trade-offs or something you know is counterproductive or useless, or if you've thought of an idea that's better or cooler or more useful than mine, then don't hesitate to let me know. The more details you can provide about why you don't like it and what makes one of my ideas counterproductive or useless, or about why your idea is cooler or more useful than mine, the better. One of the main goals of Project Decade is to give whoever's in charge of class design and player power systems a good idea what appeals to players and what will actually get them excited to get back to WoW again. And the more you can say about the wherefore and the why, the better. I fully intend to iterate on this project and make changes in response to feedback. I know I'm going to make mistakes. Heck, I've already seen mistakes in some of the things that I've done. But if those mistakes generate the kind of discussion that Blizzard needs to hear, so much the better. Blizzard needs to see player engagement, humility, and feedback actually making change in action so they can start doing what needs to be done to turn WoW around. It can be done and it should be done. World of Warcraft can last another decade. So keep the feedback coming, folks. There's one last thing. I began working on Project Decade videos back in July, and considering how many months it has taken, the fact that there are 36 different sets of feedback to curate and compile, and multitudes of decisions to make based on feedback received, ideas others have come up with, and how to weave everything together into a fun, functional, and exciting whole, I don't have a chance in the tramaculum of getting this done in any reasonable length of time unless I get volunteers to help me curate and compile the feedback I'm getting. If you're willing to help curate feedback, please let me know. If I get enough interest, I will set up a Discord server where we can coordinate everything. Thank you in advance for your feedback and support. Let's make World of Warcraft the best game that it can be.